Hello, and welcome to the Thoughtful Realtor Podcast. This is a podcast where we sit down for insights, stories, and conversations about all things real estate, running a real estate company in California, and how we find our way as leaders and business partners. I'm Connie Chung.
And I'm Kenny Gong. We're two of the founders and partners of Willowmar Real Estate.
Today, for Kenny and I, it's been so long since we've done a podcast recording of just the two of us. I think that's how this podcast started, was just the two of us. So this is kind of a fun way to bring it back, reflect, talk about something really cool. And I don't think it's something we've talked about intentionally, which is what it's like having and maintaining our friendship while living so far apart from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
still being in business together.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you all know, but Connie and I started as friends first before the two of us became business partners. Oh my gosh, a long time ago, 8 years ago, something like that. And this was all before we became founders of Willowmar. And so much has grown, so much has changed. It's certainly no longer just the two of us. We're now a team of 17, which is kind of wild. And as Connie mentioned, some folks may know, but Connie and I, even for the past many years, have lived over 500 miles away from each other. So
that's right. I'm now
long distance friends.
Yes. And what does 500 miles look like? Kenny's in the Bay and I'm in SoCal, for those who might not know. And yeah, it's crazy to think, because when we used to live, first we met living in San Francisco, and then we both moved to the East Bay and lived about 10 minutes from each other. Mm-hmm. And we would just call each other up, text each other for some spontaneous cafe work sessions, to get boba, to run errands, kind of,
or just like drop things off.
Yeah.
It would just be spontaneous drop-offs or, pop-bys. Like, it was all really, really easy and accessible.
Yeah, super special. So we'll talk about what that distance has been like. Has it hurt our friendship? Has it made business tougher? What's our relationship like now? Are we still friends? Let's get into all the juicy details.
Yes. Okay. So maybe we'll take our listeners back as a little bit of a refresher, or even those listening for the first time. Connie and I started both working in nonprofits. We were both fundraisers for different nonprofits. And when we met at a social justice fundraising conference in Oakland in 2013, 2014, something like that, we so quickly bonded over our passion about all kinds of things, about our jobs, about social justice, about food. That was a big thing that we have always really loved, is just like being foodies and trying out different, not only restaurants, but cafes, and just really embracing food culture. And Tartine, oh my gosh, I still remember there's a photo of the two of us and at Tartine from 2014, and it still is one of my favorite photos of us, even though we look, I don't know, maybe at this point 20 years younger than we are. But Con, do you remember how the idea of starting a business together came about?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think we were both in our nonprofit jobs, and then I got into real estate, and because our schedules were relatively flexible, we would meet together and work simultaneously. Oh, just that wonderful thing we loved about cafe culture in the city. That was so great. We would just pop our laptop, get a latte, sit down, chat, do our work. And I remember we just would always share stories about what we were doing in our current day-to-day work. And Kenny, you had shared about your family being in real estate for a long time. And so we both of us were in real estate as realtors in different brokerages. And we just thought, oh gosh, how fun would it be to actually work together? But we were so scared because of our friendship. And you just hear about these horror stories of working with family or good friends and what that could do, or what risk that could put your friendship at. And we really did not want to lose what was so special about our friendship. And so we decided to give it a try. We decided to date
We dated.
as
Ah!
working partners. And it was so cool because we just
Yeah.
tried it out with a couple clients. We were very direct and transparent with them, and actually really benefited because you had built such great relationships with your colleagues at Paragon,
Mm-hmm.
um, local brokerage at the time, and
Yeah.
for me it was at Vanguard, very similar boutique brokerage, and we just were like a powerhouse,
Yeah. That's
and
fun.
and got to advocate on our clients and really leverage the relationships we built with our colleagues, and even our colleagues in the industry were like, what are you guys doing? What, you're both from two different brokerages yet you're working together.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it's so commonplace today almost. I feel like we were
Yes.
breaking waves at
That
the time.
You know what's also interesting is still to this day, whenever Connie and I are out in the world together and people hear our names, they're always like, "Ah, Connie and Kenny." Like
Oh.
and I've heard Connie and Kenny as a phrase so much that it's just, it's so second nature to me. It's so ingrained in my body and my mind that I don't realize that it's like a fun like series of words that people like to say. It's so strange. People are always like, oh, Connie and Kenny,
Right.
Connie and Kenny.
It
And that
adds
was
to the
very much
rhythm.
like
Yeah.
the
Well,
rhythm. Yeah.
and yeah, to take it back, before there was Willowmar, we were
Yeah.
Connie and Kenny.
We
That
were
was
Connie and
our
Kenny.
brand. It
Yeah.
was so good. It had a ring to
ConnieandKenny.com.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, ConnieandKenny.com
Oh,
still
so much so that,
exists.
oh my gosh, because we were Connie at ConnieandKenny.com and Kenny at ConnieandKenny.com, our emails were always flagged as spam. Because I guess the spam filters were like, what are these like,
Mhm.
all of these consonants and vowels together and all of these repetitive words. But I don't know, that just felt like it felt really right for our friendship.
Mhm.
And it felt like a playful and professional way to establish ourselves as business partners too.
Yeah. I think a really huge foundation to that was that one meeting we had in my dining room in San
Yeah.
Francisco in Alamo Square on Golden
Yeah.
Gate Avenue, where we kind of came up with our, what do you call that? Not
Yeah,
your
like a
prenup,
like a yeah.
but essentially we created our business prenup.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember having a lot of nerves going into that
Yeah.
meeting because it really made us reckon with, okay, if this does not work out, what does it
What do
look
we
like?
do? Yeah.
How do we split the business, or how, what do we do with the business? What do the finances look like? Which we
Yeah.
weren't always, which is hard to talk about with
Yeah.
anyone, um, let alone a business partner, let alone a best friend.
Yeah.
And yet coming out of that meeting felt so good and so solid because we
Yeah.
were on the same page.
Yeah.
And it really just set a really great grounding to, okay, wow, I have a lot of confidence in our business relationship because we are so open and honest and direct and transparent as we are in our friendship, that it just melded so well. And it really set the path for
Yeah.
such a great ride.
A great ride. A great ride. It's been so fun. And it's so interesting because I think at that point, like, we were already so close as friends, but I didn't realize what being in partnership then, like, the impact of that on our friendship. Because I think at that point, like, I didn't have any other context for what friendship plus anything else could look like, right? Like, or friendship outside of like a romantic situation. Like, what does friendship look like if it's turned up, if it's pumped up in some kind of way? And I feel just so grateful that throughout working together, like, Connie has always been an important person in my life since as friends, but truly as soon as we became business partners and started working together as business partners for a few years, as well as like continuing to cultivate our friendship, it was like so clear that I was like, oh, Connie is one of the most important people in my entire life, like, point blank, right? And that was a shift for me and a lesson of what could be, and also like the fragility of it, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is now a committed, we are married, right? Um and I think that kind of commitment has still just like become more fundamental to our business relationship as well as our friendship. Like there was like seeds there in those first years that I think have extended and have grown beyond
Yeah.
and still to this day show up.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I share so many of those same sentiments. And it's because it's now sprouted and it's flourished and there's this huge massive garden. I can't even tell. It's like the chicken and egg. I almost
Yeah.
don't know what came first. Like
Yeah.
I almost feel like our working partnership solidified our status as
Yeah.
best friends in many
Totally.
ways. Because
100%.
I'm like, were we best friends before we became business partners? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Right. Like we were
Yeah.
close, but we weren't like super close. But then, I mean, we were, yeah, it is hard to, I don't,
Mhm.
it's, I mean, also this was a long time ago and our, our brains and memories have aged significantly. So I also just don't remember. But the impact of those first years certainly is clear to me.
Yeah. And for so many of you listening, I mean, starting a business is so, it's not just work, it's so
Yeah.
personal. And when you
Yeah.
start it with someone else,
Yeah.
the personal and the professional really intermingle that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really builds those
Yeah.
bonds
Yeah.
in some incredible ways. And
Yeah.
so it's so cool to think that Connie and Kenny
Yeah.
has evolved into Willowmar today. And fast forward, gosh,
Yeah.
almost 10 years or so,
Yeah.
we added a third business partner.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe let's talk about what that was like. And did
Yeah.
we
What's interesting, I think to me, there was also something that, and I don't know if this is, it wasn't definitely not intentional or strategic, like
Mhm.
the stability of our relationship, both as business partners and as friendships. I think that was our hope and the ideal, but we didn't really like, s- we put intention to it, but I also think we got really lucky where, um, a lot of people over the years have come up to us and have wanted to request meetings and have
Mhm.
set us down and be like, what is it like to be in business with a friend, you know?
Mhm.
Like we want to do that. That's something that we're thinking about, but we also don't know. We're also scared about it. And I think my response is always just like, I don't know, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
but like Connie and I just got really lucky. And I think the luck though came from the fact that I think we're different in many, many ways, but very similar in the right ways
Mhm.
that build a solid working relationship. And those right ways being like, I think we are just generally, we always operate from a place of consideration for the other person
Mhm.
and empathy for the other person. And I think this is just who we are as people. Like that's, we just operate from that. Um, and a level of care and um and yeah, and I think that it was always, yeah, how do we take care of the friendship first?
Mhm.
And then we got lucky because we didn't have any huge major things that like blew up the business to blow up the friendship, right? And so we were lucky also in that way. But I think there was also that fundamental like who we are as people together, really complemented each other.
Yeah, definitely. We have a lot of shared values that
Yeah.
translate so well into our business values and
Mm-hmm.
very
Yeah.
kind of very parallel. I mean, they were
Yeah.
essentially the same, which, yeah,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, just very much in consideration of of others and
Yeah.
being very thoughtful. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really the impetus of this podcast.
Yeah. And I
And
think that's actually probably, I think what has been really wonderful is then to extend those values into how we built Willowmar.
mhm,
And and that has always been so upfront. Whenever we make business decisions, it's kind of like, okay, how do we come from that place? Even if it's about finances or even if it's about whatever, building the team and adding people to the company, how do we operate from that level of care and consideration? And and it's been really nice to be able to see that like, okay, that kind of core is now so much bigger than us,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's so much bigger than us, and that like our company, because I mean, because there's 17 of us, has to emanate that like within the group has to emanate that, right? And that means that everyone that we bring in also has to come from a similar place. Um, Otherwise, like, yeah, that kind of like culture or that kind of value set will not extend without being shared by the collective,
Yeah.
which is, yeah, something that I've also loved thinking about and appreciating.
Yeah. Before we get into the talk about distance, let's talk
Sure.
about the
Yeah.
dynamics of our team. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it used to just be Connie and Kenny, and then we
And then it
had
was,
staff,
yeah.
but then adding a third partner could have
Yeah.
really thrown that off. It could have been like, oh
Yes.
gosh, I'm trying to think, were there any fears or hesitations?
No, I
I
don't
think we got
think
very
so.
lucky, or I mean,
We got lucky.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we are very intentional and we just have a very clear vision of who it is we are, what our company is all about,
Yeah.
that when we meet that person, it just clicks. And
Yeah.
so for Cliff, he was an agent working on our team. I had known him from a while back
Yeah.
as we went to the same high school together, but we were kind so we there was some sort of like friendship there, but not a super strong, you know, we
Yeah.
weren't active friends hanging out, but we had a lot of respect for each other and just, kind of part of that wide circle of friends from the same high school kind of
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, it was just such kismet in terms of timing in us thinking about how to grow, but also just what Cliff had to offer because he is so different in many ways. He brings such great skills
Yeah.
and thought processes and experience. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, the foundation to the three of us is really that core shared values of just, okay, how can
Yeah.
we do this
Yeah.
intentionally, thoughtfully,
Yeah.
and with a rhythm that works for us?
Yeah.
And that it's so crazy to think of, yeah, what I can't imagine Willowmar without Cliff in that
Oh, of
way.
course. Yeah, 100%. And it was also I mean, it kind of felt like lightning struck another time because it just felt so natural, so easy when Cliff came on board. And Cliff is so different. I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast before. He's so different than me. He's so different than Connie. And yet we have been able to, and we're always working on it, but there's this like commitment to figuring out how do we complement each other's strengths and weaknesses to kind of cover and have a lot of coverage. And I think that's really been the secret um, sauce for what I've loved most about Willowmar is that kind of um, holistic sense of leadership. And also I think similar to, he also comes from a place of deep, deep, deep compassion and care and consideration. And I think that also, because that's the through line, um, it was such a complimentary. Yeah, it was so complimentary that it was exactly the only way we could have expanded to where we are now is, I think, because of the three of us
Mhm.
working in tandem together.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, because
It
I don't think we could have done it just the two of us.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
will say, uh, it is fascinating to go from a two-person to a three-person partnership
yeah,
because in many
hmm,
ways the two it's logistically sometimes easier. You're just coordinating two
yeah,
schedules. There's good rhythm, but a third actually adds such a fascinating dynamic where
hmm,
it does allow to fill in the holes or even to poke holes of like,
yeah,
hey, like I noticed this, or like what can we do? And that kind of perspective and coverage is really fascinating in terms of getting better and doing
yeah,
better and learning.
hmm,
And That's been really fascinating
yeah.
to grow from.
And it's also, I mean, I think we've become, I mean, it is when you put good people together, they become friends and they become like a little family. And so now that we have had this company grow into a little family with all of the wins and all of the challenges that come with family.
Yeah. Ooh, let's get into the challenges because I feel like it's been very
Yeah.
rosy the things we've shared, but maybe some challenges. that we've experienced, especially as in kind of the working relationship as
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah. Oh, I think there was a period, I mean, there's always periods when we and maybe this is a good segue into the distance and when Connie moved, but it's so easy to just talk about work
Mm.
because because there's so much of it to do,
Mhm, mhm,
and there's always something that we can talk about, right? um and so there were in the past, I don't think we've had one recently, but in the past where there'd just be like ebbs and flows of like we're talking all the time, literally like multiple times a day, but only about work.
mhm,
And I think that was a challenge for the friendship because then we're skewing more business partners than friendships.
mhm,
And so that challenge, which I think it's an interesting one, um, to see how to navigate, because a part of it, and this is a testament to Connie, um, and Connie will a lot of times call or text just about friendship things. And actually, Connie and I have we whenever we're talking about business, we're in Slack. Whenever we're talking
mhm,
about personal, we're in text. And that has also been like
mhm,
really helpful,
mhm.
because it's like sometimes you do need a little bit of a compartmentalizing,
Yeah.
and also to know that like, okay, I haven't like we haven't been texting enough, so you know how do we spend time there, just as friends. And a lot of times it's I try not to call Connie ton because of course Connie's schedule is a lot crazier than mine with the kiddos. um so, and Connie's always is so great about calling me. And then we'll just like have a little chat, have a little kiki about whatever's been going on personally, for maybe it's a few minutes, maybe it's much much longer. um so that's been a huge way to overcome some of that challenge when it comes to like how do you navigate business partnership and friendship.
Yeah. Oh, that's a huge one. I know. I remember in the early years, especially with the distance, it's
Yeah.
fascinating because I feel like when we were close, there were so many of those in betweens where you could talk about the
Yeah.
personal and,
Yeah.
those as we're getting in the car to an appointment, you
Yeah.
catch up on the personal and then you get to business. Whereas when we're apart and we have our meetings, it's like, no, we got to make the most of
Yeah.
our time in
Yeah.
our meetings and all the things we have to discuss. and
Yeah.
and when especially when there are things where we might be in conflict or there's tension around, it's added to that where it's hard to
Yeah.
bring up the personal. And so yeah, having kind of that time separate to talk about the personal has been really great, and to catch
Hmm.
up and
Yeah.
to be very conscious of, yeah,
Yeah.
what's life like outside of work, because
Hmm.
I feel like even though we have distance, we probably chat more than ever because we are constantly
Yeah.
on Slack. We're in our planning meetings, we're in work meetings, we're all,
Yeah.
there's so much work that
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the communication. I remember at one period of time I felt like we were talking so much, but I did feel our friendship suffer because it was
Yeah.
all about work,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
an easy thing to get into. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been enjoying our chats, our
Yeah.
phone chats, our random text
Yeah.
message conversations.
Yeah. So let's talk about when you moved. And it was interesting because I think as soon as, well, of course, I think this is probably indicative of like Willowmar leadership and how we operate in life and in business. But when I remember Connie was very nervous about telling us, and I remember it was at Belodi.
Was it in person, or I know I think I may have shared it over our my call when
Oh,
I wasn't even back from mat leave. And I think it was like a check-in, beginning of the year check-in.
possibly, yeah, 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 yeah. Possibly, yeah. But I remember Connie was very nervous
Yes. And I was very
about sharing
nervous.
that.
Yeah.
And of course, Cliff and I have, again, indicative of Willamar culture. We were just like, great, okay, do it. Like, let's like how that you want to do this. How do we support you? How do we make that happen? And how do we continue the business? And and it was we didn't have answers for a long time. Like we didn't know, okay, was Connie going to start, was just going to move and just stay on Bay Area business? Was she going to start LA business? Like, were we going to start and at that point we weren't really like a full-fledged company at that
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
Um, and so we didn't have a lot of answers. We didn't have like an option to be like, oh yeah, we'll just open up another office of Willowmar. Like that
Yeah.
wasn't part of the cards.
Yeah, it was just the three of us. It was just
Yeah. Yeah.
us and Cliff
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
shared that.
Yeah. So it was
And
very, very different.
I I don't think I would have been able to do that had Cliff not been here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, that decision was huge. And then I think so much of it was, oh my gosh, this is actually so wild to think about because it feels so long ago and so much has changed. But there were moments when we are just like, yeah, we don't know what we're going to do. Like, we have no clue what this is going to look like. But this is a huge shift in the business and also a personal shift because suddenly Connie, who I saw a lot, was moving, was going to be across the state. And yes, we're still in California, but a flight is a flight, right? Like a 6 hour drive is a 6 hour drive. And there is going to be a lot of distance between us. So yeah, do we want to talk a little bit about how we navigated that?
Yeah. I feel like it was very hard on you emotionally. And I think that's very natural for any kind of
Yeah.
relationship, especially the person who is for me as a person leaving. I think I was overwhelmed, because I'm in a new place,
Yeah.
settling. We bought a new home, we were renovating a home.
Yeah.
We had kids, we had all these things to look forward to. As anyone moving usually has things to do and look forward to, is
Yeah.
kind of building,
Yeah.
and the person being left behind,
Yeah, I
so to
know.
speak,
The
is
big
much
left.
harder. So there was a lot of guilt with that, and I could tell there are moments of just sadness.
Yeah.
But of course, Kenny would not really show that to me, but I knew it. But I knew you were
Yeah.
like so happy for me, and of course, we talk about luckily Burbank to Oakland, really easy flight, but still, it's not the
Yeah.
same when you were used to popping by and dropping off some
Yeah.
dessert to
Yeah.
your best friend.
Yeah.
And so I feel like those early years, I feel like our friendship was a little not restrained, but definitely it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
And we were
Yeah.
like going through those growing pains of also trying to build our business. We were at such a big growth
Yeah.
with our business, and this was during the pandemic. And for those who may
Mhm.
not know, it was actually a really busy time
Oh my
in real
gosh.
estate. So we
Literally
were
the
just like
busiest.
kind of nose down, working so hard, dealing with
Yeah.
the pandemic on top of it, and learning all the rules, and also just being conscious of social interactions, not wanting to
Mhm.
get anyone sick or all of that. So definitely made it hard for the friendship in many ways
Mhm.
on a
Yeah.
physical level.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, it's interesting because I think that we have always, I think, regardless of whatever's happened in life over the past 8 years, there has always been this commitment to, again, the friendship, right? Committing to the friendship. And even in these ebbs and flows, like how the question is always like, how do we prioritize the friendship? And what are the things that we can do to, um, yeah, make sure that at the end of the day, that um, we're working in service of this friendship that we've built and cultivated for many, many years. And so I think after all of that had happened, for me, it was that moment when I I actually I don't remember exactly when it was, but the affect of it was very clear to me. And I thought to myself, okay, Connie, her husband Brian, and her growing family are in LA. So, what does this mean for me? This just means that I have to, moving forward in my life, have to figure out what life in LA can look like for me. Like, how do I, knowing that it is easier for me to go to LA than the other way around, how do I show up physically in LA to ensure that not only I continue to cultivate my relationship with Connie, but then it also became like, okay, if Connie is this really, really, really important person in my life, that also means her family, her husband, and her kids are also incredibly important people in my life, deeply, deeply important people in my life. And especially for the kids, if I don't see them as they're growing up on a consistent basis, um, it's going to be much harder to maintain and cultivate that relationship with them. So it was a very clear from a friendship level and also from a business perspective, but mostly for a friendship, for the friendship to say, okay, what does my life in LA look like? What does it look like to have some sort of presence on a regular basis in LA? And yeah, and I think that then sparked sort of the past couple of years of, I try to make it to LA at least, a, every couple of months or so. Um, and and that's been a really nice cadence and a really nice um, rhythm for us. And it has really, like, I've loved it. I've loved being able to have that as like, okay, I just know that every couple of months I have to find a way to get to LA and spend a few days down there. And yeah, and that's been, I think that's been really, really helpful for the friendship and also for the business.
Yeah. Our guest bedroom is dubbed Uncle Kenny's room. And yeah, it's so interesting to think because I'm like, oh, we have such a great strong friendship now, but I think it could have easily been lost in just a
Mm-hmm.
working relationship because of
Mm-hmm.
that lack of physical closeness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that because for me, a lot of my friendships are based on just physical proximity. Like I
Mm-hmm.
am very much a face to face
Yeah.
person kind of
Yeah.
friendship. It's hard. I do check on my friends once in a while who live farther apart, but it's not the same
It's
as
hard. Yeah.
someone I see regularly. And I
Mm-hmm.
just love that in person experience together.
Yeah.
It's like my love language, the quality time
Quality
together.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, I I think us being very conscious of how do we bring that in. And I think part of it work has been really helpful because I'll go up to the Bay
Mm-hmm.
and we'll try to have some time where we'll do personal stuff or
Yeah.
hang out friendships and meet up with our other friends too, and that's been great. And then Kenny, you've come down quite a bit
Yeah.
and we'll do family stuff.
Yeah.
And I really think, yeah, just us like making that conscious effort to have that quality time together in person is so huge.
Huge. Yeah.
And it's been a very conscious effort to now where it almost feels very organic or and
Yeah.
just natural. Like, okay, hey, it's been a while, Kenny. When's your next
Yeah.
flight?
Yeah. Yeah.
When are you coming down?
Yeah.
And it's so cool to think that for my kids, me and Mateo. I mean, they're at a place where they don't always remember everything, but they have such a strong connection with you as their uncle because of your presence in their life. Yeah, and it's not to think about. It's not even that much in
Yeah.
person, but it the time that it is, it's so valuable and substantial
Yeah.
and weighty,
Yeah.
and frequent enough that
Yeah.
it's like this rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it has been, I think that has also like, yeah, it really feels good. It feels right. And it's, I think about when we think about just us, just overall, this whole topic of friendship and business partnership, I think about like long-term friendships and long-term business partnerships. You're building something together, right? In the same way that, partners, romantic partners or life partners, they're building something together. They're building a life together. And in the same way, I think I apply that to both friendship, where we're building a friendship together and we're building a business together, which means that it's going to have pivots and it's going to look very different day to day, month to month, year to year. And the foundation of all of those things is that commitment to the people that you're building with, that you're going to, yeah, shift and build together, and you're going to change as people, and the thing that you're creating is also going to change. And the thing that keeps it all together is that commitment to each other, like that
Yeah.
relationship, and being able to say, okay, we don't know what it's going to look like, but we'll figure it out. We'll make it work, and we will embrace whatever it looks like. Because it's,
Yeah.
I only get to see Connie now in person every couple months, right? And that on paper would not work, but in practice absolutely works. And so I think that's also part of all of this is like, yeah, how do we just embrace what is possible, even if it may not look like what some kind of expectation or ideal looks like, and just embrace it for what it is.
Hmm. Yeah. And not, yeah, I appreciate how we both just like make that conscious effort to
Mm-hmm.
keep embracing and
Yeah.
adding to and building.
Yeah. Yep.
Because yeah, it's if neither of us did that, it just would have fizzled and maybe it would have just all been about work.
Yeah.
And that maybe that would have been great for Willowmar, but to
Yeah.
still have preserve, and I feel like our friendship is such a great place
Yeah.
because of these sporadic like, hey, what was that ice cream recipe that you made the other day? Can you share it with me? Or like, hey, I saw this and thought of you, or just the calls, like,
Yeah.
um, and I do remember consciously thinking, like, because I'm not a phone person, but like, let me call Kenny and just see what he's up to,
Yeah.
even though I only have like 5 or 10 minutes to
Yeah.
spare. And
Yeah.
so I would encourage anyone listening where you really want to build upon that friendship with someone, or
Mm-hmm.
it's, maybe not quite where you want it to be. It does take some work and some
Yeah.
intention and thoughtfulness, but when you get to it and you keep adding to it and the other person is too, it's like it's
Mm-hmm.
taking on a life of its own. And I really feel like there was kind of that lull for some time naturally, but we've
Yeah.
kind of like brought it back in a whole new way that I'm really grateful for.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
so
also, I mean, I think this is with all great relationships, right? Like we're talking about friendship, we're also talking about business relationships, and all of the relationships. There is that like, yeah, how do you just do this whole thing with humans? Like, how do you build something with other human beings that has to be fluid and dynamic and is hard work and takes intention, but also is like the most beautiful, most rewarding, most fulfilling things, right? Like Willowmar, my relationship with Connie, these are some of the most important things. Like I mentioned before, Connie is like one of the most important people in my life. Our friendship is one of the most important things in my life. Willowmar as a business is one of the most important things in my life. It is what my life is about, right? Is and it's not necessarily the company, but it's the relationships, right? It's the relationships that I get to have with Connie as a business partner, that I get to have with Cliff as a business partner, the relationships that I have with all of our teammates, and the relationships that we have with our clients. Like those are what make up Willowmar, and that's what makes up my life. Um, and it is hard work, but it also is like I think that's why we're human. That's what we're doing here.
yeah, oh, beautifully put. Well, let's wrap it there. I would say
Yeah.
that concludes another episode of The Thoughtful Realtor. We'd love to hear, are you in partnership with a
Yeah.
good friend? And or yeah, do you work with your friend? Are you considering it? What's it like?
What's it like? What challenges do you
Yeah.
have?
What challenges are you experiencing?
Yes.
Are you working with someone remotely? All the things. Let us
Yeah.
know. And you can find us at willowmar.com or on Instagram at willowmar__, or reach out to us directly. We'd love to hear from you. If you have tips or questions, we're happy to be a resource.
And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. We read each one of those little comments and testimonials. We love them, and we appreciate when you share the love. So until next
Until
time.
next time. Bye.
Bye.